It's 10 o'clock and it's time to resume this examination. My name's Jeff Salter. I'm the Assistant Inspector responsible for examining the Bridging Island local plan. I'm assisting Mr. Keith Holland, who's not here this morning, but he's going to be coming after the break this morning. So we're dealing today with the rest of the East of Ireland sites, continuing on from the rather long session yesterday. Thank you, those of you that were here, with your patience in allowing that to continue, because I think we made some good progress, but we've still got quite a lot to look at this morning hopefully before I take a break about 11 o'clock or so. We've got, I think, some new people here, so I'm sorry for those of you that have heard all this before, but I'll just briefly run through what we're doing here. Mr. Holland and my job is to examine the island plan on the basis of, has it got sufficient evidence? Is it an appropriate strategy for sustainable development? Is it capable of delivery? And does it contribute to the government's wider objectives? I mean, I think it's important to state that at the outset of the session, because just to remind people, that's what we're here to do, and to concentrate on those particular matters. As I always say, we've read all the representations and documents and looked at all the sites except bar one, which I will come to, and we'll deal with that in a minute. So you don't need to restate everything that's been put before me in evidence. I will be leading a discussion based on sort of primarily questions from me to you and the states about the various sites. And I'd like you to answer them as concisely as possible, please. I'll try and just run straight through today to the end of my session, and then later on this morning, Mr. Holland will be dealing with the west of the island. We're not expecting any fire alarms, I don't think. If there is an alarm, we're to leave by that back door and to assemble on the green grass area out just above there. Very important point now coming up. We had some trouble yesterday, apparently, with people on the microphones for the live stream. These microphones are not really sending out public. Then it's not really for the room, to microphoning room. That's why I'm trying to speak up. But when you're asked to speak, or if you want to speak, put your board up, and please make sure that you put the microphone on and speak directly into it, so that the live feed works properly with the recording. I don't know if I've said this. Turn your mobile phone off, please, and try and speak up so that the room can hear what you're saying. Yesterday I dealt with, we sort of tried to clarify the 5 categories of sites that we're dealing with, and we've dealt with the allocated sites. I think as far as the east is concerned, we've dealt with any member proposed site changes or new allocations, either supported by the states, the minister, or not. We've got one site to look at that is in the council's list, Appendix 2, Plan B, so-called Plan B list, which is at St Clement, C102, 104, 105, which I'm going to start with, and then there's the remainder of some other sites which I just didn't get round to yesterday before it got quite late. So that's the order of proceedings. We're going to look at the same factors that we considered yesterday in terms of sustainability of the sites, landscape impact, agricultural value, highway safety, ecology, and education capacity. Probably not dealing with that because I think that's been dealt with. I'm not going to revisit the issue of numbers for housing supply and demand. We've dealt with that on Monday afternoon. So that's where we are. I assume there's no questions about any of that. So let's get straight on, please, to the C102 and C104, 105, which are adjoining each other. These are in separate ownerships, I take it. Is anyone representing C102? Are you representing C104 and 5 as well? But they're different. They are different ownerships, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so is it envisaged? Are you putting them forward as two separate entities, or I think 104, 105 are definitely being put forward as an entity, aren't they?
They are being put forward individually or aggregated. There is no problem with an aggregation or individual.
Okay, the states, sorry, I forgot to say, with you speaking for the first time and I don't introduce you, please say who you are. I know you're Mr. Nicholson from MS Planning, but other people might not. Okay, let's start with that. The states have raised an issue of access where and I think the Minister thinks that there should be just one access for the two sites would be the best way of dealing with this site. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. St Clement is that you can characterise the parish in terms of its transport infrastructure by the fact that it has a primary route network which comprises the coast road, Le Grand Route de Cotte, and the inner road, Le Grand Route de St Clement, and then in between a number of smaller access roads which are essentially narrow lanes, and so therefore we'd look to ensure that any development of these sites connected to the primary highway network and connected through to the south onto the coast road, sir.
Yes, I mean I've been there and there's I can't remember the numbers of the road, but to get in to look at C102. I drove in and there's like a parking area that leads to a sort of backland, modern backland development behind the road. Is that where you'd envisage the access would have to be?
That's right, sir. As you say, it currently serves a small housing development to the rear of the existing properties on the road, and we understand that the owners of both sites have access rights across that area of land.
Is that right, Mr. Nicholson?
Could you just repeat that point, please, sir?
Mr. Tilley's just said that he understands that the owners of the sites have rights of access from the Grand Route de Cotte, is it? Cotte, you pronounce it, up to that car park. Is that correct? And is that how you would envisage site access being obtained?
We think there is an option to link to the main road, Le Grand Route de la Cotte. I understand that access is available for field 102. Samurai Lane is an access point that's available for the other sites as an option. I'd also like to point out that I think it's the Samurai Nursery site that was a scheme that's been delivered from the current island plan. They acquired one of the frontage units to make sure that access was suitably technically deliverable.
So for my benefit, I don't know what you're talking about there. Which development's that?
It's a scheme that Andium Homes have delivered during the life of the current island plan on a former Glasshouse site also in St Clement's, I believe. And
well, that's off at Rue de Samares.
No, it's not. It's on the inner road. Its correct name.
Le Grand Route.
Yeah, Le Grand Route de St Clement's. But there was a narrow access point, and a property was acquired to ensure that the technically sound access could be delivered. And there are a variety of options available for these sites, sir.
Any comments on that, Mr. Tilley?
As I say, sir, I think from a planning point of view, we would seek to ensure that the primary access to the site was from a primary road, and so the Minister would be keen to ensure that access was secured from the Coast Road, Le Grand Route de la Côte. If there are other access points that are available, then they may be explored in terms of pedestrian or cycle access into the smaller network of lanes.
Yeah, okay. So just tell me where, have you got a plan that you could give me where that other access point is?
Another
The one that you're talking about, other than from the main road for sites 104, 105?
Yes, they're identified on our submissions for those sites, but if you will indulge me,
I'll check that.
I can certainly get a plan to clarify those over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. That's all right. Right. Mr. Troy, we've talked before the previous session. I don't think you were here, but landscape impact. I think you're here sort of representing quite a few representations, supplementary representation, further representations about this site when it came in. And landscape impact's one of your concerns. I appreciate that. I mean, if you could make a quick bullet point about that and your other concerns. Clearly, I've been to the site, I've seen it, and that's for us to, for me to consider without going into a lot of argument here today. I don't think that would be very productive at all. But if there are any other points about, about that, and it's just the general sustainability of this site in relation to nearby facilities and public transport. Any comments on that for me, please?
Well, I think the Samurai Lane is choked.
Don't forget the microphone, please, and speak right into it.
Samurai Lane is choked. I have a police report from our chef de police, which is a term we use for our honorary policemen who look after our roads and byroads in the parish, and we have 23 police work under him, and he says this: continued complaints are received from residents in Rue de Samurai relating to the volume and speed of traffic along this road. This does not seem to have been abated with the introduction of traffic calming measures at the junction with Rue de la Croix. Increased volumes up and down this road will inevitably lead to more complaints and demands for enforcement. This may not be a main feeder road for the school, but there are a significant number of school children that cross this road every day when going to and from housing estates around Le Marais, Lesquin and FB cottages. The number will only increase as more properties come online. I don't see how this complements the Safer Routes to Jersey initiative that has implemented great improvements over the last 5 years. Rue de Samurai is one of the key roads that has to be utilised when the coast road is closed for maintenance or road traffic collisions. There are times when buses are redirected along this road,
Okay.
blah, blah, blah.
Oh yeah, all right. So you've now introduced, I mean, effectively some new evidence there, really, which
Yep.
the states haven't had a chance to consider. Have you seen that document?
No, sir, but we would accept the view that Rue de Samurai is a congested and tight and narrow lane, which is why we would seek to ensure that any development of these sites was served by the access road to the site, to the coast road, sir. So we don't dispute any of those issues.
Okay, that's.
I apologise. I checked with a lady before a good few days ago to see what I was supposed to say, and they said you can talk for 5 minutes, Mr. Troy, on your objections to these fields being used. So I'm rather snooping.
I think that's in that's in the
See?
plenary. I mean, the purposes. I'm very glad you're here because we need someone to represent the people who are, opposed to this when it's come out, and that's part of the process when we advertised the sites and asked for further representations, bearing in mind that they were not in the plan as originally submitted. So there's the landscape impact point. Do you have any comments on sustainability of the site in its broadest sense,
Well,
in relation to the existing settlement and facilities?
Yeah, I do, because we have comment from our roads committee. We have a new planning committee now. We've set this up because of the impending.
This is the parish.
The parish, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we, in a point of principle, and brought up over generations, we do not see the need to build on first-class agricultural land, which 104 and 105 clearly is, as stated by Peter Lemaitre, the President of the Farmers Union, and Glenn Hamel, our Chief Roads Inspector, who is both a top farmer and a developer himself. And that's the main core of our objections to the plans in general, and I think that's probably what's happening across Ireland. There are other alternatives.
Well, we've dealt with. I mean, you weren't here, but I did raise with. That's one of the issues that I've been looking at, and I've asked actually Mr. Lemaitre. Would you like to comment on this particular site?
Yes, please, sir. I take it you've got the same sort of map that we were produced for this site.
I'm sure that's available somewhere.
Yeah.
That's not the one that I've got at the moment, but never mind.
And basically, if I've got it up.
What's that document?
It was sent to us by Mrs. Wilson. I think it's the fields that have not previously been featured in the draft island plan have been dropped in as Plan B sites for him. And we were given maps of various fields. That's the St Helier one, and this is the St Clement's one.
Can you help me with this?
Well, it's not
I don't think you sent me that, have you?
They were not produced by us.
Well, they were produced by somebody. I was sent this.
By whom?
Well, Mrs. Wilson, presumably.
Well, okay.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is,
as you appreciate from yesterday morning's discussion, we're very wary about documents being produced on the day and new evidence being produced that other people.
The point of the document is just to show you this block of land is huge. And in Jersey terms, for a start, that's a big advantage. You've got one block, most of it's in the ownership of one retired grower. And it's all farmed as one block, and it's incredibly good land. In fact, those of us who are old enough to remember the outdoor tomato industry, the owner
Aylesfield tomato industry.
Outdoor tomato.
Yes.
This was the best tomato growing land in the island, and since then it's been used for growing potatoes very, very successfully. It's Green Island, which is about 100 yards from the bottom of the site, is the most southerly point in the British Isles, and so it has a very strong climatic advantage in this area for growing crops.
Okay, point noted. Any response from the States on that?
No, sir, other than to recognise the fact that we do recognise it's productive agricultural land. I'm not sure of the exact position in relation to Field 102. It doesn't appear to be in productive agricultural use, but certainly we recognise the use of Fields 104 and 105, sir.
Yes, Mr. Troy, could you, unless you've got anything to say about 102?
No, I mean, I think everyone would, well, certainly in agriculture, realise that is not quite such good land as the rest.
Okay, thanks.
Right. My statement from Glenn says 102, similar but a wetter field due to being lower in the topography. But it's currently used for grazing and is laid to wildflower and has a lot of wildlife using it, including egrets who come off when the spring tides are high. They feed in 102 and around the 104 and 105 area.
Yes, I don't think anyone's suggesting 104 and 105 have got any particular ecological value, are they?
No more than the normal hedgehogs, blackbirds, and
it's an agricultural field.
It's an agricultural field.
Yeah, okay. Any comments on ecology? Well, Mr. Nicholson, do you want any? Have you done any ecological surveys of Field 102?
We are not aware there are any designated protected sites there. It is, as has just been discussed, it's an agricultural field. I'd just like to endorse what Mr. Pilley said. We've over the last few days we've debated the general land availability situation in the island, the lack of brownfield opportunities, which is a characteristic of Jersey, and we endorse.
Well, yeah, we're not really going back into that.
No, but it's to endorse what Mr. Pilley's just said. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Thompson, do you want to make a comment on this site?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I was just going to point out that 102, 104 and 105 are very close to 128 and 125. 128 I'm going to talk about in a minute with 127, but they are totally unused fields, and it seems bizarre that that fields that are being farmed by Jersey Royal, and I produced a letter from Jersey Royal saying how important they were in my submission, are being considered when there are two fields close by which are totally unused.
That explains, I think my version was redacted, so I didn't know it was from them, I don't think. Anyway, thank you. All right, well, we're coming on to your site in a minute. We might as well take that next. But is anyone, Mr. Pilley or Mrs. Day, any further comment before I move on? I think I've got all my questions that I needed answered. No? Okay. Right, thank you. Well, now, this is not, the list on Appendix 3, I'm afraid, was put together in a rather sort of, well, I think we just followed one of the council's list, which was helpful initially, but it's not really grouped. So I'm going to try and get some order into this, and I'll just go through my list of questions and comments on the sites that I've got, and people I think I might be here to promote them. 128, C127 and 128. Now, Mr. Thompson, as an apology from me, I haven't been to see your site. It's the only one that I haven't seen because it came in late. There was I think as you recall, there was a misunderstanding. It wasn't logged by the states initially, and they produced a corrigendum report on their consultation responses, which I've now seen, but that came after we were doing our visits I think in October. I'm not quite sure, but it didn't. Anyway, I will go, probably immediately after this, to have a look at it. Your main argument seems to be that it's an extension to the urban area, or I think the states would say it's a suburban extension, and it's not productive land. Do you own it?
I am a partial owner of 127, and Mr. Troy, who's no relationship to Marcus Troy, is the owner of field 128.
Right, okay. So your
128 has been, and I think 127 have been put in separately and as a different proposal jointly.
Right.
So 128 has looked, there was a proposal on my part for 128 and a separate one for 127, 128 combined, with 127 accessing through 128.
Okay, right. Well, I'm not sure that there's any real particular issue with regard to access from the states.
Just in terms of the issue of access, you'll probably note that a lot of the fields in St Clement scored reasonably similar points, if you like, when assessed in terms of their original assessment. And I think it comes down to the issue that was raised yesterday, how then do you differentiate between some of the sites? And I think, as we've discussed, the transport infrastructure in St Clement, the road network is such that you've got two primary roads running east-west, the coast road and the inner road, and then you've got a series of smaller lanes that run north-south between those two routes. As the constable's already described, Rue de Samray suffers from very heavy traffic and is congested, has got a lot of development along it. Ponson Lane, which would serve this site, is not quite as restricted as Rue de Samray, but again it's a relatively constrained lane. The junctions at either end are not particularly good, and the access to this site would need to be through an existing housing estate. So I think we just acknowledge, sir, that there are difficulties of access with this site, but do acknowledge that the site is not currently used productively for agriculture. So it comes down to that balance between some of those considerations about things like access, vehicular access relative to existing use of the land. And then the relative location of the sites relative to existing services, etc.
Okay, thanks. I mean, that's a useful summary. I think what you missed yesterday, I will come back to you. What you missed yesterday was Mr. Holland's sort of intervention, which when I outlined the factors that we're taking into account in looking at all these sites. Obviously, the states in the first instance have had to do that to balance out which sites they think best meet their need for affordable housing, which is what they're allocating, and taking into account all of these factors, and obviously we've got to consider that as well. What I've been asking everybody else yesterday is on these Appendix 3 sites, which are not being supported by the states, is why you think your site should be included in that balance as opposed to all the others that have been put forward. What's special about it? So do you want to make any comments about the access and then just address that point?
Could I make a comment, please, about 128 and the assessment that was provided and which you will have, especially as regards the agricultural value. The agricultural value, it scored low on, which meant that the agricultural value was good, whereas in fact, quite to the contrary, the agricultural value should have been scored much higher, because the land is not suitable for commercial agricultural use. 128 does not have Condition A agricultural condition applied to it, the bona fide agriculturalist provision. As I think Mr. Thompson has submitted, a letter has been provided by Environment, I think it is, to acknowledge that it is its land is not suitable.
Jersey Farmers Union.
Jersey Farmers Union, sorry, has been provided to suggest that it's not good agricultural land, and therefore I think it should be reassessed or reviewed in that light and should have scored better in the first place.
That's my view, and I've made a note of that, and I'll take that into account in our assessment of the sites.
In relation to the access, Pontisall Lane is a much less used road than Rue de Samurai. That I lived on it. I've lived on it twice in my life, once as a teenager and once later with my young family. And I always considered that it wasn't particularly dangerous or congested road, and it has had traffic calming measures applied to it since. And there are new pathways and cycleways adjacent to it and through down the common to behind the parish hall and the sea. It is, in my view, a wonderful area for young families to live in. It's got a primary school, a secondary school near it, and within safe walking distance for children. I think I disagree that its access onto Pontisall Lane and the main roads would be or is a problem. I don't think it is as heavily used. I don't think it is a particularly dangerous or difficult road.
Okay. As I said, I have been down there actually, but not, I haven't actually looked at your particular site because of this issue problem, but I will go and take that into account. Yes.
I just wanted to say that the Minister in his post-consultation report said the only real objection was the spatial distribution. He said that that he didn't want this field because he felt there were other fields around the island from a spatial distribution point of view. But now he's come up with 104 and 105, which are only 300 metres away. So I would say the spatial distribution argument is null and void, and it was the only objection he had.
I think it's right for you to come back on that. One of you, please.
Yeah, as we said earlier, sir, a number of the sites have similar attributes, and it comes down to detailed consideration of some key issues like access and the current use of the land. And as we state in our submission, we fully acknowledge that the site isn't currently used for productive agricultural use.
If I may add, Inspector, as for the purpose of completeness, you'll see under policy CI5, sports, leisure and cultural facilities, that what is effectively field number C131, which is attached to La Rocquiere School, is proposed to be designated for sports, leisure and cultural facilities. And I said I'm just adding that for completeness as to the future context of that road.
Thank you.
So can I speak on the context of the other fields by La Rocquiere School?
Which, you need to speak up a bit, please. And,
can I speak regarding the context of schools being adjacent to new planning applications?
Was it in relation to this C127 and 128?
Any around that way that purport to make a sales pitch?
Well, I'm really concerned with this site.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Socrates Architects. Who are you, sorry?
Yes, Nicholas Socrates Architects. Just to pick up on Robin and Peter's points, and particularly on the access road, the Troy family actually own the access road.
Speak up a bit, please. I think
Troy
the ladies
family
at the back are struggling to hear you because you're away from them.
They own the access road through the estate themselves, so access through that estate wouldn't be a problem. And there's been talks with the owners of the houses in the estate, and none of which have an objection to development in those fields C127 and C128.
Okay, well, I forgot to ask you, I think that's, we're finished with this actually really, but I've got plenty of notes about this. Are you proposing this site as an affordable housing site?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
With everybody else, which
but the owner of 128 would be quite happy for it to be put forward as affordable housing. I haven't got an issue with that at all.
And so,
in fact, I'd rather prefer it, quite frankly.
and the site will yield 46 three-bed houses or 61 two-bed houses, a combination of each.
Okay, thank you very much. Those of you here promoting other sites or being here to answer questions about other sites, please state at the outset whether the site is proposed as an affordable housing site rather than a private housing site. Mr. Nicholson, I don't think, is that a legacy upstanding board? Right. I don't think there's anyone here from Rainbow Nurseries, which is one of the other ones. I'm going to go to Trinity. T873, that's not one of yours, is it, Mr. Stein? I don't think so. There's no one here from there. That's a very small site, isn't it? I think, from what I could see. Have you any comments about that?
No, sir. It's. I think our comments are set out in the Minister's response on that site, sir.
Okay. So T588, Rue de Boulay. That's Mr. Stein, one of yours.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, sir.
Yeah, I mean, the state's comments. Well, this is it's not that prominent visually in the landscape. Are you saying? I don't think you're alleging that's much of an issue, but you're saying it really extends the village forming out to the north of Trinity Village.
That's right. So I think our concern would be that it's, as you say, extending the village envelope into a more rural aspect of the village. The northern edge of Trinity Village is more rural in nature towards the Cushel National Park, and it would not be an appropriate extension to the village at this time.
Okay. Any comment on that, Mr. Nicholson? And when I went, it seems to me that it's not a unique issue in Jersey, but the sight lines coming out of the Rue de Boulay onto the main road are not very good. Any comments on those 2 points, please? Extension of the urban form out and the sight line.
I think virtually all of the sites that we've been discussing today are an extension of the urban form. By virtue of the built-up area being drawn so tightly, that is by default what all the rezoned sites are.
Yes, but some have different, some of them are different to others. Well, they're not all like that, but some are, better or not than others, one would imagine.
This is not a particularly sensitive landscape zone. It isn't the Coastal National Park. Being nearer the Coastal National Park is not, in my understanding, one of the constraints we're looking at. It does abut the village. All the social infrastructure is there. Technical infrastructure is there. It's acknowledged to score quite well. The scale is of no strategic importance to agriculture. It's available now for right-sizing family homes.
What do you mean by right-sizing family homes?
Well,
gateway?
It would be
through the gateway, or
be,
another through the parish?
Affordable housing site through the gateway.
Well, that doesn't have to be right-sizing homes.
It doesn't have to be, but it can be if that is what the needs are. We think this site should be higher up the list. It's ready to go if your views align with ours.
Any comments about the Rue de Boulay?
Well, the centre of Trinity does have traffic issues. Most of the lane network in Jersey is not set out in a modern engineering fashion. I'm sure there'll be a technical...
That's a fair statement, I would say.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a technical solution.
As diplomatically as that?
Well, we come across it regularly, so this is a legacy of the character of the area. Highways engineers, if they were let loose on the island, would turn it into a very different place.
They'd knock a lot down, I think, but yeah. Okay, would the States like to come back on that?
The only point to make, sir, is just in relation to the relationship of the site to the Coastal National Park. The proposed extension to the park is to the north of the site, and the policy regime would require consideration of the impact of development on the setting of the park, sir.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, the extension abuts it, doesn't it?
That's right, sir.
Extension abuts the field. Is that an extension there? I can't remember. I've got your useful map, which I should be dealing with this tomorrow morning. All right, I've made a note. I can check. It's all right. Yeah. I'll check it.
A paper map with us potentially Coast National Park comparison map that was produced.
But yeah, I would suggest so that this is part of the extension to the Coastal National Park. I think the current boundary is drawn very tightly to the existing cliff top.
Yeah, in some parts I can't remember. I've walked quite a lot of that bit, as I'll say tomorrow, but I can't remember that part. All right, I can check that on a future note, unless there's anything else you want to say about that, Mr. Nicholson.
There is a road across the side of the site there, and it is, in my understanding, an extension of the Coastal National Park.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Right. Is Mr. Carney here? No. It was relating to T269. Is that yours?
Trinity Grange. Is that?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's well. There's the issue I've got there, and just a brief discussion about that, and with any other comments, is there's a potential drainage issue there. Any comments about that? Isn't there a drain next to or through the site?
As in a foul drain?
Yes.
I mean, it could be a design could mitigate that problem. It could be a development.
Could you
could be,
speak up a bit? Sorry.
Development could be designed around that issue. Looking at the site, it's one of the best performing sites in Trinity. It's in the built-up areas to the north and to the east, with the parish hall to the east, and the parish and the constable are both in support for this site to be developed into either affordable housing or housing for the elderly. Affordable housing would be through the gateway, and housing for the elderly, if that was permissible, would be dealt with through the parish. The site is non-agricultural. For all intents and purposes, it's a garden, an old garden. The history of the site was there was a large house there which burnt down many years ago. The site is surrounded by trees, and those trees have a TPO order there's a blanket TPO on all trees. However, those trees are to the perimeter of the site, and that will work in our benefit, as the developer would have there's no intention to cut down the trees, but that would help maintain the landscape character of the site. The trees would effectively form part of the house's back gardens. And a site like this, because of the trees, would yield approximately 24 houses.
Okay, so a few points to respond to there. My map is on my phone, on one of my maps, so I need to explain that to people, because I think I'm not texting my mates while you're talking to me. Right, any comments on Socrates?
I think so. We would accept the relationship of the site to the existing built-up area is good. It's well placed relative to the rest of the village at Trinity. I think the key issue is around the capacity of the drainage infrastructure, and also the potential use of the site. Clearly, if it was coming forward for affordable homes, then it would be considered as under policy H5.
H5?
Yeah.
Okay, made some notes. Anything else you want to say about that?
Just that, like I said, the drainage can be mitigated, and the affordable housing will be accepted on that site.
Okay, thank you. That's that one. Mrs. Stephen, T1404. Yeah, I've just been past that. Mr. Holland actually looked at that one, but alleged access difficulties.
My client
confirms. And any particular points that you stress in terms of its advantages compared to many of the other sites?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's all right.
My client confirms that providing safe access is within their gift. They have been asked that question directly.
Where to?
Onto the main road. So I should confirm, so it's available for affordable housing needs, and the client, or my client's very happy to be responsive to whatever that need, happens to be in response to all the evidence that comes forward. It's available immediately. We've talked on the last few days about supporting sustainable communities, and Zion is a small settlement with shops. There is a co-op supermarket built literally on the doorstep of this site. Yeah. So my clients are scratching their heads quite a bit to understand why building new homes within walking distance of a decent shop on a really good bus route with school routes to schools is not.
Yeah, there's no
a good
school there, though, is there?
No, but not Granville, Hope Valley is down the road to the south on the primary route,
Yeah.
and there are good bus
yes, I went there.
routes.
I've been there, yeah.
There are school buses that go up to St John's and the rural parishes. I'm less sure about the primary school, so I wouldn't want to talk to that, but certainly for secondary, anybody living in those homes would be able to get a bus to school.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pilley? Or Mrs. Day?
Yes, so I don't think we contend any of the spatial issues. Indeed, one of the sites we will consider later on is J1109, is just across the parish boundary.
Yeah, so that's where we had a bit of confusion, Mr. Holland and I must admit. So, I mean, he went to see on it's the parish boundary presumably splits right down the middle.
It runs a fairly convoluted route in that area, but yeah, the spatial issues are accepted, sir. I think, as we've said on a number of occasions, the assessment of these sites can quite often revolve around some of the finer details, and at the time the access issues weren't clear for this site, so that was part of our reservation.
Do you accept that they now are clear?
If safe access can be secured to the site, then I think in terms of its the performance of the site, then it would equate in a similar manner to that which we've assessed to the northwest. So,
if I may, I'd be happy to go back to my client and get written confirmation of how access can work. I've been told that access is achievable.
Well, I'm prepared to take your word for it. You've said that in public, on a live stream, that it's available. The only some of these sites, I think we might revisit anyway. Not necessarily all of them, but I can just check that. Is there any plan? Just remind me. Is there a plan that you've got that shows that?
I believe there is, but I'm struggling to remember where I've filed it, sir, so I will make it available.
Perhaps you could submit that to the programme officer, please.
Yep.
Just for clarity. Right, we're back at. Again, it's just the way that they're listed. We're back in Trinity Village now. I think T267, 269. That's one of yours, Mr. Stein.
Yes, it is, sir.
And there's states have raised some queries about their view. Extends the urban form away from the village centre, but there's also an issue about a sewer that runs across the southern part of the site. Would you like to comment on those two things, please?
Yes, sir. Firstly, it is put forward as affordable housing through the gateway. As Mr. Nicholson said, these rezonings do tend to extend the development into the countryside. That's the nature of what we're looking at. This site is edged by the existing built-up area on the west and the south, so it integrates quite well, I would say, with the existing village. The sewer to the south, it hasn't been laid that deep, so it actually compromises the agricultural quality of the land. But we've spoken with the drainage section, and it's quite easy to either reroute that foul sewer, or, as Mr. Socrates said in relation to another site that he's dealing with, we can design the development around the position of the sewer. The site.
Any idea of the cost implications of rerouting then?
Not exactly, but given that this site could deliver between 25 and 30 three-bed dwellings, that would be something that could be achievable within the overall cost. I mean, it accesses onto a primary distributor road, La Rue de Tadagion, and it is well served by public transport Route 4. All the infrastructure is in place. It is visually discreet and has raised banks and hedgerows, so which would be retained as part of any redevelopment. We think it's a good site, sir.
Okay, I've made a note of that, Mr. Pilley.
I think our principal concerns would be around its relationship to the rest of the village and extending the urban form into the more sort of open coast and countryside aspects of that part of the parish. And again, as with the site previously discussed, the site abuts to the north east, the proposed extension to the Coastal National Park.
Okay, I don't think there's, I mean, I can go and see for that again myself. I can remember it actually, so I don't think there's much point to going back over some of those points.
Just one point, I mean, if we look at the northeast of the site, that's actually made up of development. You've got houses, and presently that's in the green zone, so I can't see that it would impact on the Coastal National Park to any great degree. Thank you.
Oh yes, yeah, okay. Right, okay, let's move on, yep. Is Mr. Minty here? I don't think he's... Are you acting?
Sorry, I'm acting on behalf of Mr. Minty.
So that's T536, is that right?
Correct.
And this is a sort of quite a narrow field above the road, isn't it, as you drive through to the from the village to the west?
That is correct, sir. Again, it's put forward for affordable housing through the gateway. Access would be achievable at the southwestern end of the site.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's quite a steep bank, isn't there, along there?
There is an existing...
But then right at that end of the site.
Yeah. Again, it's edged by existing built-up area to the south and east, so it integrates well with the existing village. It can achieve between 30 and 35 three-bed dwellings, for which there's the greatest need. It can deliver early. It'll be deliverable very quickly. And sites scored very poorly for access, but the road does actually serve two industrial estates. You've got Springsides nearby and La Rue de Béchet a little bit further on, and which heavy goods vehicles regularly use this two-way road, and I wouldn't say it's a particularly poor road.
Okay, thank you. Any comment from about your concern about the access?
Yes, sir. We would just
one obvious way in.
That's right. Yeah, whilst it might be heavily trafficked, the road itself is not particularly wide, and often vehicles need to pull in to let other vehicles pass. As you say, it's a raised site, an elevated site, so we think there could be some landscape impact, and it's also adjacent to a wet meadow, so that there may be some biodiversity impact in terms of the site.
What's it? I'm trying to remember what it's used for. Is it arable or?
It produces one potato crop a year. That's it, sir.
Any comment on agricultural value? Okay, thank you. Mrs. Stephen, Lemura Nurseries. Sort of adjoin, well, they adjoin, that's you, I think, isn't it?
Adjacent to...
Yeah, adjacent to a small, what's the settlement called? Mofont, yeah. Currently in use. It was, I think, in October.
The information, sir, that I've been given is that the youngest of the glass houses are over 20 years old and coming to the end of their viable lifespan. There are a few crops still grown to supply local shops, which makes the complex just about viable, as the growers have to compete with cheap imports. The export market is effectively dead and has been for over a decade now, I think. It is a site that was identified in the 2002 plan as a future site for affordable homes. And one of the key points that my clients have asked to put across is that it is a Glasshouse site, a brownfield site, sir, which I know we talked about this either yesterday or the day before. We actually have a definition of brownfield land that includes glass houses, and that's in our current island plan, and I can give you the page number if that is helpful. And I was a little bit confused by the government's definition of brownfield land. The understanding I took from the conversation that it was just within the built-up area, but our definition of brownfield land extends to glasshouse sites as well, and agricultural sites around the countryside. So sorry for that diversion, but it is important.
Well, quite interesting. I'd be interested to hear State's comments about that. I'm just trying to think whether there's anything. Well, let's deal with those points first, and then if there's anything else.
So just if I could draw to a conclusion, it's on the edge of a settlement, again with good bus links. There are shops. There's a big community centre. Yeah,
there's not much. What is there at?
There's a co-op, there's a fuel station, there's the Mofont Community Centre, which I believe is quite well used. It's got a good bus route down to Five Oaks and the schools, and also up to St Martin. And as an edge of existing built-up area, it scores pretty well on landscape impact. There's access from the primary route network as well. Access could be taken onto Grand Route de Mofont.
If you wouldn't mind, Inspector, Mr. Steeman, could you just reconfirm the page number that you quoted of the 2011 Island Plan?
I've taken a print, a PDF, so I'm going to take a guess because I'm not quite sure, but it's near the beginning. It's either number 4 or number 5.
Thank you.
Okay, what you didn't say was, are you proposing this as an affordable housing site?
I beg your pardon, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Gateway site.
Yep.
Okay, a couple. Mrs. Day or Mr. Tilley, a couple of points to. Are there any comments about the sustainability of the site? I think that was a concern of yours, and despite its, was it put forward in the 2002 plan or included?
I've been told it was identified in the 2002, so it might have been a backup site.
Oh, right. Okay. Not as a allocated site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't confirm that, so without checking, but it may have been a safeguarded site for future development. In terms of the points raised, clearly it does relate to an existing local centre. I think the point that we've made is that as you've identified, Sir, Mofont is not as blessed as perhaps other local centres are with the range of facilities that might be available. So I think that was our point in that respect. As has been identified, the glass houses are of more modern construction and are still in active use. We haven't established whether or not they're subject to any disuse and disrepair conditions. Generally, we regard glass houses in the island as temporary uses of development essentially over agricultural land, and some planning consents have been subject to disuse and disrepair conditions, which means that...
Right. That's a new thing for me. I wasn't aware of that.
Okay, well, there is a bit of a mixture of that condition being applied to glass houses in the island. Some are subject to that disuse and disrepair condition.
Do you know the answer to that, Mrs. Steedman?
I don't know the answer, sir, but if I could respond, I'd
well, no,
like
wait,
to be able...
let Mr. Tilley finish
yes,
then.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just really to make that point, sir, that the glass is more modern construction, is in active use, and we'd need to check whether it was subject to that disuse and disrepair condition.
Okay, does access not a problem? Landscaping I can see for myself. I don't think there's anything else, is there, you wanted to comment? Oh, what about these glass houses?
Okay.
Definition. For my interest, I mean, have you defined...
We have...
Well, you've got a policy about them, haven't you, which
yep.
in effect
so you have
redefines it, I
excuse
suppose.
me for this tome that is the 2011 plan. So, first of all, I'll refer you to the glossary of the 2011 plan, which defines a brownfield site as land which or has been previously developed. I will then take you to the page which I believe Ms. Steedman is talking about, which I've now just lost. Sorry. 4 or 5. Which was right at the strategic policy framework under the heading Brownfield Land, which is on page 20 of the plan. So,
is this the 2014?
Yeah, the 2014 plan. Revision. So about midway through of the second paragraph under brownfield land, it says what the island does have is a stock of agricultural buildings, such as redundant and derelict glass houses, which may help contribute towards the island development needs over the planned period. Not all brownfield land, and in particular redundant glass will be suitable for redevelopment because of factors of remoteness, distance from services, amenities and transport, and sensitive landscape location, and each site will need to be considered on its merits relative to specific criteria. And then I move you to the policy for glass, which is under the economy chapter, under policy ERE7 of the revised 2011 plan, for which the opening paragraph states that there is a presumption against the redevelopment of redundant and derelict glasshouse for other uses unless the alternative use is directly related to the agricultural or diversification of agricultural activity. So I think that between those three parts, it's quite clear that actually the presumption is against the redevelopment of glass, and that we would direct its use to be retained within the agricultural industry as a primary consideration.
Okay, I think, well, we're going to... We can talk about that in the economy session as well, I think, which is, when's that, a week Monday, I think. I'm running that one. Anything you wanted to come back on there?
If I may, sir, Mr. Pilley has talked about the disuse and disrepair conditions that can be attached to some glasshouse sites. It's my understanding that, yes, they are used or have been used in the island and are attached probably to the more modern glasshouse complexes, but it's been found through recent appeal decisions that the Minister has never enforced those conditions. And one of the reasons that they've never been enforced is because the cost of remediating land after you've had a glasshouse complex on it is very, very significant. So the cost, basically, if that condition were imposed, you could be asking a landowner to be spending hundreds of thousands of pounds to return land to agricultural quality. And I've got a gentleman here who will understand the numbers much better than I'm able to talk to you about, that you're returning it to land where the return is very, very little. So there has been, I don't want to speak for the Minister, but my impression is that it's been a an issue that's never been enforced and has been allowed to let lie. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Mr. Lemaister, did you want to comment on the agricultural viability?
I do, sir, and I don't want to fall out with my neighbour, but the situation there is that it is one of the prime units for producing local agricultural produce. Mr. Stedman is quite correct to say that the tomato industry in Jersey collapsed around 2008, 2009.
Yeah, we heard that yesterday.
This site is one of 3 main sites that are used for local production. And this site would produce probably somewhere around a third of all the tomatoes, peppers, aubergines in the island. Again, she's correct to say that the newest glass on the site is about, I think, 26 years old. There is a slight area, or if you visited the site, there is an area of older glass sort of round the back.
I didn't go on it, I drove round it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see there was things growing in it,
Yeah,
and sort of got out and had a quick look. But
And I can see why anyone would put forward this site, because it is right next to what in the island we call the Mofor estate. But from an agricultural point of view at the moment, it's still important.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to comment on that, or I was going to move on?
I was only just to go back on to the enforceability of the disuse and disrepair planning conditions. I think we can
We
accept...
don't know that they apply, do we?
I think we just wanted to confirm
background.
that we have had some challenges of the reasonableness and enforceability of those conditions when applied as conditions. So when we published supplementary planning guidance in relation to the use of planning obligation agreements, we've made it clear that actually the appropriate vehicle to secure the restoration of the land is via the use of a planning obligation agreement, which would perhaps include the securing of a bond or fund, which would retain that proportion of funding allocation to secure the restoration of the land.
Okay, thank you. I think we're nearly there, ladies and gentlemen. I've noticed some people have come in possibly for the 11 o'clock session. We're just we sat very late yesterday, so we're running over slightly. But I'm hoping I've just got a couple more sites to deal with here, 3 or 4 maybe. So I'm going to continue, and then we'll take a short break, and Mr. Holland will come back. We're not too far away. It's you again, Mrs. Stephen, I think. Hugamont. I'm struggling with your Jersey pronunciation of French names.
And I'm not going to pretend I
just
know.
Speak them in French as best I can, but correct me if I'm wrong.
I wouldn't dare, sir. I look to others to assist with that. I've been asked by my client to emphasise their desirability to make this available as a site. They're happy for it to be for affordable housing through the gateway. In their view, it is a brownfield site, which, if development is allowed on this site, it would avoid the need for building on some greenfield land. They've done a lot of work themselves to promote the site and feel that a comprehensive development of this piece of land, which to them seems like a logical extension of the built-up area in this location, they've asked us to promote it for them.
Yes, I saw where it was. But, it looked like a field to me. Is it a paddock or what's on it? Or is it behind? It was behind some buildings. Is it garden land or?
No, to the rear. So to the rear, my understanding is that it has been used more recently as a storage area for boats.
For what?
And boats and various equipment. And there was a polytunnel, but that's when I last saw it, sir.
Well, if there's a temporary structure or building on it, that's not well, that's for the states to answer. Any comment? Okay. Any comments on that? I mean, it's well, finally for you. I mean, what's good about this? I mean, it's a pretty remote area, isn't it? There aren't really any facilities there, are there? Tinmore Park, is it called?
I'm not familiar with the names of all the
well, that's the
yeah.
On the map I'm looking at on my
Yeah.
phone. What the states have called the sort of what looks like an isolated settlement to me. Or
That's right. So it's one of our smaller settlements, and as you've identified, there are very few, if any, services that serve this locality. We'd regard this as an incursion into the countryside, notwithstanding any temporary uses of the site, which may or may not be authorised from a planning point of view. So.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say, Mrs. Stephen, before I move on?
No, sir. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Mr. Nicholson, we missed out one of your sites yesterday in the St Saviour's list. I gather it's in the parish, but it's quite remote, really, from the rest of the suburban area of St Saviour's. But this is a site adjoining near the hospital.
Yes, sir. This is
S579.
579. It is adjacent to the built-up area on two sides, abutting the boundaries. Following on from comments made earlier, it's not near the Coastal National Park either. It's distinctly distant from the Coastal National Park. It's adjacent to the St Saviour's Health Estate.
It's a long way from the National Park, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just making comments about the landscape values after the...
yeah, it's all right. I mean, well, okay, I've seen it, and again, the same comments apply. I can assess that for myself.
The suitability score is noted by the Minister's response as scoring relatively well. They note it is remote from the village centres. I would like to add a layer of context to this assessment, and as part of the government's estate strategy, as has been discussed over the last couple of days, this is an area where I think the scoring should be seen in the context of the emerging proposals for St Saviour's Hospital estate itself, which is, in my understanding, due to be released for residential development. And it cannot be both spatially appropriate and spatially inappropriate for residential development to be in this area, according to the government's own scoring and the government's own sites. There are no known ecological issues. There's no public landscape profile. The site is behind existing development. It's a strong candidate and it's ready for delivery, sir.
For affordable housing?
Correct.
Gateway affordable housing?
Correct.
Okay, Mr. Tilley, what's the difference between this and St Saviour's Hospital?
Well, I think St Saviour's Hospital is...
And what's going on there?
Well, as has been indicated, remains in current active use, and as has been identified, it is one of the sites that is likely to emerge as part of the estate strategy to be released in the future. The site to the south is a listed building, and so in terms of the former Victorian mental hospital.
South of this site, or?
Well, I think the argument that Mr. Nicholson is putting is that because this site is going to be developed in the future, then that regard should be had to that. I think we're just making the point that one of the reasons why this site will be developed in the future is because it would help ensure the viability of the listed building, which was built as a mental hospital in Victorian times. It's Grade 1 listed building. Therefore, the government would seek to secure a use for that, sort of viable use for the site that could retain the building. There is also some
proposed. So it's not really a conversion scheme, is it? Is it? Would you say it's brownfield, the hospital site?
You could qualify it in that manner, sir. It's built as a hospital. It's now largely
I didn't
redundant.
go in there, I drove past, isn't it? It's on the south side of the road, isn't it?
Well, the health estate borders both sides of the road,
does
sir.
it? Right.
The health estate to the north is still in active use and probably will be for some time. The site to the south is partly vacant, although there are still some health services on that site. And there is also some, so to the south of the site you have the largely redundant Victorian mental hospital, you have a former nurses' home, and you have some key worker accommodation. And as has been identified, that is likely to emerge as part of the release of the land associated with the government estate in the future.
Is that in your 425 figure?
No, it's envisaged that this site would not emerge within the plan period, is my understanding, sir.
Okay, any other comments?
Just to make a point, in terms of its spatial relationship, it's not that distant from the site that we've just discussed. It is one of our smaller settlements, but we do accept that the area will be subject to some development in the future, sir.
Okay. Mr. Dyke is not here, is he? 477. Okay, so the last site I've got, and I'm happy to, if someone says I've missed something, please let me know, is MN423A, Mr. Nicholson, route Genestier. States raise issues of its remoteness, access on a narrow single lane, and sort of landscape impact, really. Any comments on those?
Yes, sir. I think the states also acknowledge that this site scores relatively well. It is on the edge of the village. It is adjacent to the built-up area. On the other side are also existing buildings. There is a group, former agricultural sites, which I believe is mainly in residential use now. So it sits neatly between two built forms. It's not in active agricultural use.
It sort of seems to have almost like an orchard.
Correct. Yep. It has full infrastructure. It has a relatively narrow frontage, but is very easy to access the main road. And I think one of the points I wanted to emphasise is that in their response, the notes from the Minister says that other sites score better. I don't think that is the case, particularly in the St Martin allocations. This site scores exactly the same as all the other St Martin allocations. I think it is a comfortable site in the context of what is being promoted and has been accepted elsewhere within the village, and I don't think this site should be ignored in the manner that it has, sir.
Right. Mr. Tilley, I've made some of your points there. Anything you wanted to come back on there, really?
It was just really the point about the relationship to the rest of the village. I think we accept there's development to the east and the west of the site, but this is really at the extreme edge of St Martin's village, and as you turn down Rue de la Genestière, you're starting to head towards St Catherine's, which is the more sort of coastal and edge of St Martin's village. So
again,
in
I've been there, so I can see that for myself and assess
sure.
that for myself.
Okay, thanks.
You've got your board up still. Is that historic? Right, ladies and gentlemen, have I missed anything from a state's point of view, or anyone else here wanting to say anything to me about Appendix 3 sites on the east of the island? Good. Right, thanks. That closes this particular session then. I'll go and find Mr. Holland and suggest he starts at... Oh, he's here. Sorry, hello. Okay, do you want to have a 10-minute break for people to...
I'll start at 11:30.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody, and thanks for your time and contributions. And I hope the microphones were better. I'd like some feedback on that from someone, if not electronic feedback.